One of the things that I think is really important for everybody, but especially for writers, is authenticity. You've got to know who you are. You've got to show up in your work. In this digital age, of sound bites all over the place, readers want to connect with someone at a very personal level. They want to know that that author is looking out for them, writing about them. They want to be able to see who we are come through. Part of that journey is understanding who you are yourself first. It's very hard to show up, and I call it showing up unapologetically, authentically. Don't apologize to anyone for who you are. But until you know who you are, until you've done some of the work to really understand what you're all about and to be good with it and recognize that I am who I am, not everybody's going to like what I have to say, and that's okay. You want that to come through in your work, though. You want that to be really clear. Don't write about something that you're not passionate about. If you don't care about it, it's going to show. But when you do care about it, it comes through in spades, and it really helps to connect with those readers. But you really do have to do the work first on yourself to understand what you're about, so that you can then help others on their journey or their path or whatever message you're trying to share with them.
Well, there's a challenge. Writing is writing, creativity is creativity, but selling a book is a whole nother matter. And I think these days it's pretty much on the shoulders of the writer or the author to figure out a way to assist a publisher in getting their book sold. And that's distasteful for a lot of creative people, because that requires discipline and requires time in an area they're not so happy to be in. But it is required. So what I've done with the advice of publishers that I've worked with is, of course, establish establish a website. Sometimes it'd be good to sell your books from the website. It's another opportunity to expose your name and get it out there. Start up a blog. It could be on your website or some separate thing, or do a guest blog with other folks' websites to get your name out there. There's all the social media, but if you look at the analysis of what social media does for you as a writer, it's not a whole lot. So for instance, I, of course, launched myself into Twitter and got a little following of writers. Now, think about that. My following of thousands of writers is almost like self-serving. All these writers are trying to promote their books as well. So you end up promoting your books to writers who are promoting their books. And so it's really hard to see how that ends up promoting your name, other than to other writers, in any way to possible readership. That's a tough sell. I've listened to some seminars these past day or two, and one of the ideas that surfaced, of course, is email options, where you develop from a few readers to a bunch of readers to a whole bunch of readers to zillions of readers, step by step. It's a lot of hard work to develop an email following where you can just let them know what's going on, not too often, because nobody likes email that is unsolicited, right? So once in a while, maybe once a month, you will let them know what's going on, what's coming out in terms of your own work, where you might be, that kind of stuff. So that's not a bad idea, but that idea does take a lot of work. You're going to have to spend time developing your email list and assure that those people are happy with you and don't just unsubscribe you to oblivion. Those are some of the ideas. So the social media, the blogging, the website. There are other services. Oh, one more thing that came up. Try to get reviews for your work. Amazon, for instance, is the #1 seller of books in the world, and most people will have their book on Amazon. And the only way to get really through the first level of being noticed in Amazon is to get at least 50 reviewers, I understand. And once you get there, Amazon begins to promoting your book a little more than just having it on the site.
And as far as reaching readers, it's important to use the methods that's going to reach your audience. You have to know your audience and where does your audience hang out. In my case, I like to use the social media, and I have found blog spots and other groups online that are my target audience, and I begin participating and developing relationship within those groups. Everything is by relationship today, and so it's important that we, as writers, as authors, take the time to develop the relationships. You don't just write a book and they come.
Many books find their audiences organically. So hopefully you have a cover that matches the audience, right? And I talked about this in the class that I taught earlier today. The cover is not about you. It doesn't really even matter if you like the cover. Your audience has to like the cover. So certain things have to really resonate. Be very clear on what the genre is, because people say to me, how do I reach my readers? And I say, well, what's your genre? I don't really know. It's kind of a little bit of everything. You're not allowed to be a little bit of everything. Pick a particular genre. That's probably the biggest challenge that I think many readers do face, is finding that exact funnel, because and especially in a particular, like in genre fiction, those readers are on particular sites. They're not all surfing in the same pond, so to speak, right? The same thing with nonfiction and memoir and poetry. I mean, you really have to define your audience first and foremost. You can do that also by profiling similar books in your market, right? Take a look at authors who write books similar to yours and kind of see where their audience seems to be. Maybe their audience is on Facebook, maybe they're, because the audiences are going to start somewhere, and then you're going to pull them into your website and hopefully to Amazon. Readers never show up as super fans. Readers just show up as readers, and you have to convert them. And I read a book that was called The Curve by Nicholas Lovell, and he talked about how you really only need 1,000 superfans to make a New York Times bestseller. But if you think of the definition of a superfan is crazy for everything you do, and they want to read everything you do, right? So the number 1,000 is really relatively small when you consider how many books are out there, right? So instead of thinking in huge numbers, start to think small, because you can do so much more with even 50 superfans than you can if you haven't really managed your fan base. So bringing your readers in, make sure that you have a newsletter or some other way to communicate with them. And I don't recommend using Facebook as much, because as much as social media is part of everybody's world now and should be part of everybody's campaign, it's harder to get visibility without spending a lot of money on ads. So make sure that you have a newsletter where you can communicate with your reader. And as you start to kind of build readers, invite them to be part of your superfan group, where they get exclusive things like access to books before they're released. They get to help you pick your cover, maybe even name a character. And they then become part of this exclusive tribe of people that you have. I know some authors who have superfan groups who will launch a book and within a week have 100 reviews from this group of superfans. You don't need a lot of these folks, again, because a lot of times the definition of a superfan is somebody who is also sharing it with their people and telling their friends. And 95% of book sales come from personal recommendations and word of mouth. So think about growing those superfans. I've actually talked to some authors who say, it's hard to manage a ton of people, like especially if you're trying to sort of ignite your fan base and say, all right, can you help me out here? I've got a book launch. I'd love you to go out and share this on your social media, that kind of a thing. Sometimes less is more, because if they have really active fan bases, if they have lots of friends, if they know a lot of people. I talked to one author, and she actually ships boxes of just swag. So bookmarks and character trading cards and things like that she sends to her readers around the country, and they just pass them out. So your superfans can really help you to promote your book. And the sooner that you can start building your mailing list of readers and ignite them and get them excited about being part of your exclusive group, the quicker you start to build your superfan base.
You have to find specifically what your genre is. Okay, I am into science fiction heavily, and fortunately for me, the vast majority of writers' clubs and everything else are also into that. I like to go to sci-fi conventions. I like to go to conferences like this one where it's represented, where I can talk to people. And because in a lot of cases, and what I would like to have happen, would be getting good word of mouth. You know, you do that. And I know several authors, including this one woman who goes to, Comic-Con and all these other science fiction conventions and stuff and pitches her book. And, word gets around. And when word gets around, that's actually really good. I mean, when you think about the R.L. Steins in the world, the George R.R. Martins, massive success stories, all started as a groundswell. People saying, oh, you got to read this. And that's what you go for, and that's what I hope for.
I started building my audience when Next Therapist Please was already published. Long after I should have started. You really need to start a couple years before your book is published. And I started with Facebook. I was already comfortable with it. And then I got a publicist to work with. And I got on board with Twitter. I got on board with Instagram. I have a different Instagram and Twitter and Facebook account for both my fiction and nonfiction. I keep them separate because they're different audiences. And so I spend a lot of time on social media. I've also found that through my publicist, we were able to build a really great email list. And newsletters are, I think, the best in building readership because the content is much broader and, of course, larger. There's a lot more information that you can relate to your audience, and it's much more flexible. It is also harder to maintain because there is so much content. So I do a mix of both, and I found working with a publicist, I was able to get interview opportunities where I continue on radio or TV, where I can continue to talk about my projects and keep my readership developing.
Kevin Kelly, who's a genius and a brilliant writer, put up a post called 1,000 True Fans. And I wanted to honor his post because I thought people should read it. His argument was, if you're a musician and you've got 1,000 people who care enough about you to attend 2 live concerts and buy a CD every year, you're done. Right? That's $100,000 right there, maybe $80,000. Everything else that comes with it is gravy. 1,000 true fans, 5,000 true fans, call it 10,000 if you want. That's not the way most authors think. Most authors think they want infinity, but they want those people to be anonymous, and they want those people to demand nothing. And the alternative, and the one that actually works in a post-publishing world, is where it's not even close to infinity. It's a finite number of people who you can identify, who you can talk with, who you can be a concierge for, who you can shepherd through something. And the way I like to phrase it is this. Most publishers want readers for their writers, right? But in fact, magazines do better because they look for writers for their readers. And that shift is dramatic. If you can be in the business of bringing stuff to your readers instead of looking for readers for your stuff, everything changes.